Black and Immuno Week, a week where we will celebrate, amplify, and support Black voices in immunology. Before we begin, we would like to thank our major sponsors who have made this week possible. You can find our full list of sponsors on our website, and we will have live captions and ASL interpreters during the sessions. Click the CC at the bottom of on the screen to access captions. You can submit questions through the comment function on the platform, not Q&A, to be clear. As a reminder, we require all audience members to be polite and respectful while in the Black and Immuno space. If we see anything offensive, your comment will be deleted immediately and you'll be banned from the platform. After the conclusion of the week, recorded videos will be posted on our YouTube channel and transcripts will be made available on our website, blackandimmuno.org. I'd like to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Jessica Diarra, and I'm an immunology PhD student at Stanford University. And I'll be the moderator for this session today, titled Building Your Scholar Brand, How to Stand Out in a Crowded Career Market. We would like to welcome Dr. Gertrude Nonterah, who will lead this session. Dr. Gertrude Nonterah is a medical communications professional. She graduated from Lewis Katz Temple University School of Medicine with a PhD in microbiology and immunology in 2015. She is the host of the Bold PhD YouTube channel, which helps PhD students and PhDs prepare for and navigate the career market outside of academia. Welcome, Dr. Nonterah.
Thank you very much, Jessica. All right. So good morning, everyone. I really appreciate, first of all, I want to thank Black and Immuno for inviting me for this great event. I'm really honored that you would reach out to me to present on building your personal brand as a scholar. So a little bit about me, and I know you're going to see many PowerPoint presentations today. So I do have a PowerPoint. However, I am going to focus on just speaking with you, just having this conversation with you. And if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer that during or maybe after this presentation. Whichever one is the most convenient. So a little bit about me. I graduated from my PhD in microbiology and immunology from Temple University School of Medicine in 2015. Now, shortly before I graduated, I sort of knew that I didn't want to stay in academia. But because I was an international student at the time, I didn't have a lot of choices. All I could really go into was becoming a postdoc. And so I applied to be a postdoc. So I left from Philadelphia and I got a job in San Diego, California. I left Philadelphia, PA, and came to San Diego, California, and to start a postdoctoral research role. Now, when I started, even though I had a great PI, I had a great team, I still knew in my heart of hearts that I didn't want to be in academia. And this was after I had been quite prolific in my academic career. During my PhD, I had published about 5 papers. 2 of those were first author papers, and 3 of those I was a middle author. After that, when I joined my postdoc, I actually was able to publish 2 papers from my postdoc. I was a first author on one of those. So I was quite prolific in my career, but I still knew that academia was not where I wanted to be. So when I finally had an opportunity to jump out of academia into a non-academic role, it took a while. I will be honest with you, it took a while for that to happen. And I'll start with how I even left academia. So in 2018, in February, one day, our boss called all of us into a conference room and let us know that because funding was running out, right, the grant funding was running out for us, in 90 days, we would all be losing our jobs. So that's how I essentially left academia. I was fired. I was let go because funding had run out. So when I was let go, I began to look at where I could be. I'd always wanted to be in medical communications and medical writing. At this point, I had started a side hustle as a freelance writer. And because I had started that, actually when the job ended, I came into writing full time. I was freelance writing from home and also was a stay-at-home mom. And doing that actually would end up laying the foundation for my career in medical communications. But before I would successfully get a traditional role with a medical communications organization or within a company, I had to build a personal brand. At first, when I lost my job, I was applying for jobs and applying for jobs and applying for jobs, and nothing was happening for me. Not even a response. I continued to get, we're so sorry, we had more, thank you for your application, but we had more applicants. We had more qualified applicants than you. I continued to receive this message. But the thing that was a game changer, a complete game changer for me, was when I finally built that personal brand and began to put myself out there and began to let people see who I was, what I brought to them, in terms of not just the skills I had, but my personality and the skills that would allow me to be the great candidate for them. I began to do that on LinkedIn. And through that, I was able to get into my very first role as a medical writer with a marketing agency that focused on helping customers in the life sciences industry. I currently work at Thermo Fisher Scientific, which is quite a big biotech company. And over there, I'm a scientific content specialist. And I do everything from writing documents, writing things like application notes, or creating video content that is used for educational purposes. And so, how did I get started with this? And how can you also get started with building your own personal brand? Well, before we even do that, let's define what a personal brand is, okay? A personal brand simply is not anything icky, okay? But a personal brand is a widely recognized and largely uniform perception or impression of an expertise, competencies, actions, and or achievements within a community, industry, or marketplace at large. Okay. So it is, again, let me repeat that. It's a widely recognized, largely uniform perception or impression of an individual based on the experience, expertise, competencies, and actions. So what was I doing? I was a freelance writer at the time. And so I began to share links to some of the work I had done for some of my clients. I began to share tools that I was using in my writing work. I began to share some of the results I was getting from my clients, because at the time I was helping specifically healthcare based companies to write blog posts and to help them rank on the first page of Google. So when people looked for a particular topic, they would find the websites of these companies on the first page of Google. So I began to share my processes, share my results, share the work that I was doing. And so I began to create that widely known perception of myself as a writer, as a health writer, somebody who has a PhD, has a very strong background, and has writing experience. And that was super helpful in helping me get that first position outside of academia. Now, I know I don't have access to all the chat answers here, but I want you to think. When you think about tennis, right? Who comes to mind? Who's a player of tennis that comes to mind? Most of the time when I do these presentations, I'll get Serena Williams, I'll get Rafa Nadal, I'll get Roger Federer. That's because these individuals have been playing the game long enough, right? And have built and have done very well also, but have built that personal brand around tennis. Even though they may be good at other sports, they have honed in on tennis as their thing. When you think about football, a lot of people will tell me Tom Brady, right? That's because Tom Brady has been in the game for a long while. A lot of people associate him with football. So, what are people associating with you, right? What do people know about you? And a lot of the time, another objection I run into is like, well, building a personal brand, that sounds very icky. That sounds very putting myself on social media. I don't know if I like that. It seems sleazy. But I'm here to tell you that academics have been building personal brands for decades. For decades, academics have been building personal brands. How have they been doing that? They've been doing that through their published papers. They've been doing that by speaking at conferences. They've been doing that by showing up on television for interviews. They've done radio programs, and so we begin to know specific scientists or specific immunologists for groundbreaking or for breaking ground in a particular area because they have focused on that and they become sort of rock stars in that area. That's building a personal brand. The only thing that has changed is that now you don't only have to depend on your publications or only have to depend on your conference talks or only depend on television appearances to build a personal brand. Now you can start building a personal brand with free tools that are easily available to you. And for me, that free tool was LinkedIn. All right. So now, why should you build a personal brand, right? I've talked about what a personal brand is, how that helped me, but why, right? Why? Because there is an article from 2011. It was published in NPR, and the title of that article was "A Successful Job Search is All About Networking." Now, I know I'm not talking about networking here, but there's a stat in that particular article, and ever since then, people have quoted that stat in different ways. But I'm going to tell you what that statistic is, and the statistic is that usually only 20 to 30% of jobs are posted online. Okay. So when you are looking for an opportunity, you're looking for your next career move, and all you do is apply online, what you've done is essentially cut yourself off from about 80 to 70 to 80% of the job market. All right. And so I have and so somebody's asking, is Dr. Nonterah supposed to have slides? Yes, I have slides, but as I was introducing myself, I said that I'm sure people are going to see a lot of slides today. And so I'm going to be presenting, I'm going to chat a little bit. I will share my screen as well, but for to there, speaking to camera. Okay. Yes. Okay, wonderful. So again, about if you're not applying online, you're cutting yourself off from about 70 to 80% of the job market. But how do you access, right? How do you access that 70 to 80% of the market? The way you do that is two ways I'm going to share with you. Number one, you can do that through networking, and you can do that through building your own personal brand. Right now, I wish that this was a standalone statistic, because I've also have friends who work in hiring or human resources, and I've had conversations with them. And I remember a specific conversation I had with a woman who worked in HR, human resources, at the university where I was a postdoc, and she was specifically responsible for recruiting faculty for the medical school. So I remember asking her, how does that work? How do you end up recruiting? How do you find the best fit, or the people that are, going to be teachers at this great institution? And she said, well, a lot of the time we depend on referrals from people over here. So if people don't get a referral from one of our already existing faculty, then it becomes really difficult to hire them, because we don't know much about them. But if we get to know a whole lot about them before they join, then it's more likely that they'll get it, and it's more likely that they will succeed. Now, that's a little problematic, right? If you just hear that, that's a little problematic, because that's how come we can have institutions where it's not very diverse, right? But it also taught me a very, very important lesson on not just hiding your work and thinking that, oh, I'm just going to focus on my work and I'm going to do the best work I can. And as long as people see my best work that's out there, then they will definitely say yes to me coming into this role. And whether that is in academia or outside of academia, right? And so by building a personal brand, you also open yourself up, right, to that part of the job market that is usually not advertised online. So, how do you get started with that? So, at this point, I'm going to start sharing my screen. All right. Okay, great. So, I'm going to present. All right. So this is the article I had mentioned, right? You can find it on the NPR website. All right. And I talked about this. So, how do you get started with building your personal brand? There are a few ways. All right. First of all, it's important for you to define who you are and what you want out of building a personal brand. Who are you and what do you want out of building a personal brand? For me, I wanted a job. I wanted a traditional medical communications or medical writing job. For some people, they may not just want a job, but they may want opportunities to collaborate with others. They may want opportunities to be in the media. They may want opportunities to do other things, right? So it's important to define who you are. And that could include, it could include so many facets of you, but I've just listed a few of them here. Your academic background, your research focus, your publications, patents, any notable work you've done. Like today, I was on LinkedIn and I saw that one of the individuals I follow, she had won a grant to attend a conference, right? That's pretty exciting. So she had shared that. That's something that is notable, right? Your hobbies, your interests, the kinds of roles you're looking for, milestones that you've reached in your career. Maybe you just finished attaining candidacy, or maybe you just finished your dissertation and just defended it, or maybe you just walked, on the graduation grounds. All of these milestones you can share. So who are you and what do you want to get a job? Maybe it's to build thought leadership. Maybe it's to be seen as an expert or contributor in your field, a really respected one, right? It's to gain opportunities to collaborate, or to, gain media opportunities, or to build a knowledge bank. Building a personal brand is actually one of the reasons I'm speaking to you right now, right? For me, building a personal brand has done way more than I've even thought it would do. Not only has it helped me get a job, but nowadays, one of the things that happens to me, at least I'd say, at least once a month, is somebody reaching out to me and saying, I want to offer you a job. It's not even about, we want you to interview, or they may let me go through the interview process, but a standard thing to go through. But because of my personal brand, people are reaching out to offer jobs. And there was a time in my life when that was not the case. I mentioned that, right? That there was a time when I was applying for jobs and nobody was paying attention to me. All right. So three places where you could do this. I put Twitter here a while ago, and maybe I could have taken it out, but I'm going to keep it here. Any social media platform really can be a great place for you to build your personal brand. But LinkedIn has been the biggest one for me. You can do that, of course, on Twitter. That's another popular platform for academics. And then your own website, okay? LinkedIn, Twitter, or your own website. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second because I do want to jump onto LinkedIn. All right. So can people hear me, see me still? Okay. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't lost anybody. All right. So how do you get started? So like I said, once you define who you are and what you want, you can begin to do that on a platform like LinkedIn. Now, I will share my screen on LinkedIn on the three parts of LinkedIn that I think you should have filled out starting today. Don't wait until tomorrow. You can start today. Okay. All right. Great. So let's jump to LinkedIn. All right. So this is my LinkedIn profile right here. I have my name, I have my PhD at the end of that. And I mentioned that I work in medical communications. But another thing I do on the side is helping PhDs build personal brands for careers they want. I'm also the creator of the Bold PhD, and I also speak. Right. So it's important that whenever you are filling out your LinkedIn profile, number one, let's have a picture of you. Like, let's always have a picture of you. Don't be a faceless individual, right? But also right here, especially for those of you that may be PhD students or perhaps postdocs that or graduate students, because I know maybe sometimes not everybody's a PhD student, but if you are in that place where you want to begin to explore career fields, I highly recommend that you pay attention to this top fold of your LinkedIn profile. What are you putting there? A lot of the time, I see people put postdoctoral fellow at Stanford University or PhD student at MIT or something like that, and that's fine. But let's add some context to that. All right, which roles, for instance, are you interested in? Are you interested in medical communications? Then put in PhD student and then put a slash interested in medical communications roles. Maybe you're interested in working in regulatory medicine or in regulatory affairs, and so you put that there. So every time you fill this top folder, and the way you do that is simply, there's this pen over here. It's fairly easy, fairly straightforward for you to do, and you can do that. I usually just put like little emojis on here just by right clicking on my desktop, and there's emoji right there. I put that in there just to make it a little bit more colorful, but don't leave it there, right? Let us know what it is that you are interested in, because what ends up happening is that LinkedIn has a very, very robust search algorithm. And so when recruiters are looking for people to fill roles, they're going to go to the search bar. When they go to the search bar, they're going to type in medical communications, and they're going to type in PhD, right? They're looking for somebody for a medical communications role who has a PhD. And then they type that in, and then a list of people come up. Oh, look at me. I'm like one of the first people that came up. I totally did not rig this. Okay. But I'm one of the first people that came up in this. Like, I have a post on this. If they're looking specifically for people, all right, they may click on people, and then there's a whole list that comes up. And if I was a recruiter, and the recruiters really do this, I'm not making this up, but if they now type this in, now they have a list of people, so they can begin to click through and begin conversations with these people about these roles. However, if you've only put PhD student or postdoc or something like that in there, and nobody knows that you're interested in medical communications, or you're interested in regulatory affairs, or you're interested in something in particular, then nobody's going to know that. Okay, so having that top really, really important, because like I said, it is helpful especially for people who may be looking for somebody like you for roles. All right. Nowadays, LinkedIn has something known as the creator mode that you can turn on. And this is for people that may want to create content on LinkedIn. Now, that's another part of this that I wanted to talk about. Once you start, you've uploaded your picture, you filled out your top fold, it's all nice and ready. I would even say nowadays, because I'll talk about the creator mode. Nowadays, they allow you to put a link in your LinkedIn profile. You can create what I usually call a living resume. What's a living resume? I'll show you one. So within Google Docs, I'm going to click on a link right here. It says Gertrude Nonterah Medical Communications Resume. You can click on that. And then if we view that, okay, this is my resume, my medical writer resume. I have it in Google Docs, and I have it set so that the people cannot edit this. But then I have shared the link to this. Anyone with a link can see this, but they cannot edit it. And then I have that embedded in my LinkedIn profile so that when people click through to check out who I am, they can look at my resume and see what I have done and see if I'm a good fit for what they need. Now, this link is also something, because I run a business, I have my business link there, but you could also put a link to your living resume here. And why is it living? It's living because when I update this, I don't really have to change the link. It's updated. So it's living. That's why I call it a living resume. Okay. And I have that there. But one of the other things that is going to help you build your personal brand and build it quickly is to create content on LinkedIn. And like I was sharing earlier, this could really be anything. It could be that you are talking about some successful thing that you've recently won. You've won a grant, you won an award, you are, working on something exciting. Always be careful to check with your PI, right? Like, don't share anything that may cause somebody to steal or scoop your idea, because this really happens. This really does happen with people. But this is something that you can start doing to start creating content, is sharing parts of your day, parts of the things that you're doing that have made you successful or that are allowing you to succeed as a PhD student. All right. And then another part of this is you can also, and okay, let me share my screen really quickly. Go back to the presentation. All right. All right. So what should you post on LinkedIn? There are a few things you can do. You can share your own or your team's publications, an uncommon insight that you've learned from your job, any news around your subject of study. This is always great for you to share. I remember when the COVID-19 pandemic had just started. At the time, I was an adjunct professor at a community college, and the vaccine had just been approved, the first one by Pfizer, and I had some of the students come up and chat with me about that, about my thoughts and what the process was, and it was such a great time for me to talk to them about how vaccines are actually approved, and that was like a content piece that I shared on my social media that went over really well, because it gave me a chance to talk, for people to ask me questions, for people to there are people that agree and disagree, but at least I've shared what my thoughts are and what the process usually is. So that was a big new subject that I shared around. Share other people's posts. Maybe, there's somebody whose content you like a lot. You can share that. Share events in your industry. Share lessons from something you're reading. Right. So share what you know with people. That's the first thing. The second thing is get to know people. Throughout this process of me building my personal brand on LinkedIn, one of the great side benefits is getting to know people that I know that if I had kept to myself, I probably would never have broken into their circle. And those people in turn, right, we both have mutually referred each other to opportunities. And so getting to know people is such a great thing to do with your personal brand. How do you do that? One of the great ways that people have done that, I've noticed people and people have noticed me, is by crafting insightful comments on other people's content. You're already posting content, so people are going to notice you that way. But also be social, right? It's a social media platform, be social. Even though it's a professional social media platform, you can be social. And then learn from people. I am a big believer in learning from people. The same things, but it's always a good idea to have an open ear to listen to what somebody has to say, right? And when I was getting started in medical communications, one of the things that really helped me learning from people was doing something known as informational interviews. And LinkedIn helped me do that. Again, I connected with somebody actually in person. I followed up on LinkedIn, and this person invited me to their office. And this person, she had a PhD. I have forgotten, was it immunology? I can't remember, but she had a PhD in the biomedical sciences. And she had started her own public relations agency for biotech startups here in San Diego. And so I went to her office and we had a really great conversation, around an hour of a conversation around how she had gotten started in the field. And that was very, very helpful to me when I was trying to break into medical communications as well. So regardless of where you're trying to go, having LinkedIn, creating content, learning and connecting with people can open up opportunities for you to talk with people who are already doing things that you may want to do. right? And some of the questions you can ask during these informational interviews include: what does a typical day look like for you? How did you land your current role? What would you say is the best trade for people who end up here? How much money can I expect to make? And don't be afraid to ask about money, right? I used to be very, very I don't know the word, but I used to hesitate when it came to asking about money. But money is important. The world has gotten super expensive these days, and it's important that you know that you're getting fairly and appropriately compensated for the work and the skills that you bring as somebody who is Black in Immuno. There's so much that you bring, right? What don't you like about this job? This is also a really important question, because you may find out from an informational interview that what you thought a career path is and what it actually is are two different things, right? I remember when I was starting my PhD, what I thought I would be doing as a research scientist and what I started doing as a research scientist were completely different. However, I did, eventually fall in love with the things I was doing, and I did them quite well. But you want to know, what don't you like about this job, and what do you like? What kind of decisions you make? Do you make any decisions at all? And what kind of advice would you give to somebody breaking into this role? So these are just sample questions for that. Okay. And after an informational interview, as you build your personal brand, right? And as you meet people and people open up themselves for informational interviews, thank them. And you will eventually also become the person people begin to ask for informational interviews from, because a few years from now, you may have gotten to a place where people now see you as a leader. People see you as, the person that they aspire to be. And so it's always nice when you say thank you to people after they have you've given them an informational interview. And also, don't be like, if you're looking for a role in that space and the conversation has gone really well, and based on the informational interview, you've learned so much that even validates why you want to get into this field. Don't be shy to let people know that you're looking. There are some people that frown on that, like, don't ask people for a job when you go for an informational interview. And I only partially agree with that. If the person was kind of not very open, but if they agree to an informational interview, they should be open. But yes, don't be shy to let them know that you are looking. So those are the three things you can do to really build your personal brand on LinkedIn. Share what you know. And this comes through you sharing original content based on who you are and what you do. The second thing, get to know people, right? You can chat with other people on their profiles. There are people that I have done coffee chats with. I remember somebody even paid me $15 just for a 20-minute coffee chat. That was so exciting. And also be open to learning from people, because that's how you learn about other career paths that you may not know about. So I will pause here. And if there are any questions, I will be more than happy to take those.
Wonderful. So I don't see any questions yet in the chat, but I will get us started off. So I'm currently an immunology PhD student, and one of the couple of tools that we've been advised about here at Stanford is a tool called Handshake. Have you heard of this tool, and how would this be integrated into branding yourself as a scientist?
Oh, great. So I've never heard of Handshake. Can you tell me more about, have you tried it? And I can maybe give some commentary on that.
Handshake has been branded as a newer version of LinkedIn that is heavily used here, at least. I don't know, maybe it's because it's a Silicon Valley environment, maybe that's why. But it's essentially a tool where you put your resume up, you put all of your information up, but it allows you to connect directly with employers, and employers can identify you on this tool as well. So I was just wondering how that, like what your insights were on that. Another tool that's also been shown, I don't know if you heard of this one called ORCID or ORCID, where you put your list of publications. And I was just wondering if you have any advice on using those other tools in terms of branding yourself as a scientist and putting yourself out there.
Absolutely. So I think all of that is helpful. Definitely when I was like entering the job market, I didn't know about Handshake. I know about Orchid. And I know that you can put your publications there. But yes, absolutely. For those of you that may be very, very much trying to be in academia, I think something like Orchid is really important for you to continuously update your publications on. And again, you can use that in tandem with some of these other tools because, like with Handshake, you're going to upload your resume, but also let us see your publications, right? Also let us see the other sides of you. So if these tools allow you to do that, then you can do that. But yes, definitely with Orchid, you can continue to update your publications, because for those of you that especially want to stay in academia, this is going to come in so super handy. And I mentioned earlier on that I used to be an international student and I had to apply. So this is for anybody that's an international student who is in Immuno listening to this. When I had to apply for what's known as an employment-based visa in order to stay in this country for a longer period of time, I had to show my publications. And, it was kind of a hassle going into PubMed and looking for every single publication and trying to curate them. So having them in a curated place is also really helpful. So yes, absolutely. Either one of those tools can be helpful. Any way to get your career ahead, really, I always find that it is great.
Wonderful. And we do have a questions popped up. So this is from Medina. And it's on the screen. Do you see it? So she's
Yes.
asking, what would you say are the benefits and drawbacks of a personal website compared to LinkedIn?
Great question. So I think that you can use both of them in tandem, or you can have one or the other. Personally, I have both. Now, a personal website, right, nobody can really shut that down. We have been around and seen social media platforms get shut down, right? Or go out of vogue or never be really used much for the original purpose it was used for. We've also been around and seen Instagram and Facebook be completely blacked out for a whole day. So let's say you're trying to do something on LinkedIn and that day, for some odd reason, LinkedIn is blacked out for that day or for a whole week. Well, hopefully that never really happens, but having your own website will be your backup. It will be your home base. So I always see as my personal website as my home base. That's where I put everything about me. And then I see LinkedIn and other platforms that I use as my embassies, right? I'm creating content there and all that. But ultimately, if people want to find out more about me, find out more about what I do, yes, they can get a lot of that on LinkedIn. But if LinkedIn was to go down today, they could also find all of that on my personal website.
Wonderful. I was just going to ask a question that's probably more targeted towards Black immunologists, which is the idea of implicit bias and branding yourself, and how, sometimes having your picture up or making it clear that you are a person of diversity can be in many ways maybe not a hindrance, but can be a source for inherent bias or implicit bias. So I was just wondering, like, what are your ideas or strategies for kind of bypassing that? For instance, for myself, I read an article about LinkedIn on how you should potentially, what you should do is you should have your image only available once somebody is your friend on LinkedIn, not prior to that. So I was just wondering, and if those are some tools that you can do, or what are some things that you can do to really tackle a world where you're very much a minority
Absolutely.
in the sciences.
Absolutely. I'm aware of that and definitely have felt that, but I don't hide my picture from anyone. And if you want to do that, that's absolutely your prerogative, right? If you want to present yourself from implicit bias or people seeing your picture and then bypassing you because of an opportunity, the way that I've if somebody is going to bypass me because I'm a Black woman, right, who has, in spite of all my qualifications, and I'm, we're, a lot of us are very highly qualified here. In spite of my qualifications, you're going to dismiss me based on my skin color, then I should not be collaborating or working with you in the first place. So if people eliminate me based on that, that's fine. That's somebody I don't want to work with anyway. So for me, that's how I've done that. And so I don't hide that I'm Black. I don't hide that I'm a Black woman. I sometimes have braided hair. I sometimes have wigs on. I sometimes have my natural hair. It's all part of who I am. And I shouldn't be ashamed to put that anywhere. But if you feel that that's something that is potentially stress inducing for you, then definitely you can decide to take your picture off until somebody actually connects with you. But personally, I've not done that.
Great, thank you. Um, and then I guess I'll ask one last question. If anybody has any more questions, please feel free to add them. My last question for you, Dr. Nonterah, is about the concept of like a timeline when you are developing your brand as a scientist. So for instance, I'm very early in my PhD. I'm a first year student. So I don't like what should you be doing over the years? A PhD is quite long. People say it's a marathon, not a sprint. What can you be doing while you're still a student? As many of the people that are on this platform are, to develop yourself over the time before over the years before you actually have to hit the job market. Outside of the things like how early should you start looking at the actual job market, and how often how should you be like developing yourself first before you start hitting that job market?
Great. That's a good question. I think there are two questions you're asking me. The first question is, when should you start looking at the job market? And the second question is, how early should you probably start thinking about building your personal brand, right? Am I correct? Okay,
Yes.
great. Then that's a really good question. So let's tackle the job market question first. I think that it's okay for you to wait until maybe that when you know you have about a year out of your PhD, for you to begin kind of like putting out sensations or feelings for what the job market is, right? Right now we are in such a flux, right? Yeah, we've heard about layoffs from Apple, well, not Apple, but Twitter, Meta, Amazon may be laying people off. I happened to see yesterday that some biotechs are laying people off now, right? So for somebody that may be entering the job market at this time, all of that sounds a little scary. But it doesn't mean that every company is laying off. It doesn't mean that every company is, not taking, new PhD grads, or even within academia, right? It doesn't mean that everything is shut down. So this is the time, that 1 year out is the time for you to maybe start having conversations, having informational interviews, building your connections, connecting with alumni who may be in specific roles, connecting with alumni that may be at companies or at the university you want to work with. This is a good time for you to start doing that, to start laying that great foundation. So about a year out is a good time, even with your your personal brand. If you kind of want to wait until that last year, but I say give it about a year, right? Because it takes a little bit of time to warm people up to you and all that. So that by that time that you finally defend your PhD and are out really on the job market, you would have built that network that you need. You would have contacted the people that you need. You would have a good sense of whether it's a good time to enter this field or not. You would have a good time. We can never ever really predict the future, but you're going to have a lot of data on your hands that will allow you to make informed decisions. And also you'll have the network to depend on. The second part of your question is, when should you start building your personal brand? And I don't think it's ever too early or too late to start building your personal brand. Your personal brand is with you before you get a job and after you get a job, right? I still continue to post on LinkedIn. I still continue to share my insights on what I'm doing in my work and the news and what's going on around us. Yesterday, I made a post about the workers within the University of California system are on strike right now, specifically graduate students and postdocs. And I talk a lot about this, where I say PhD students and postdocs are not always the most well compensated, and yet are doing a lot of the work. And therefore, if you don't want to stay in academia after a PhD or your postdoc, feel free, or your graduate education, then feel free to look for opportunities outside. So it gave me that opportunity to say that again. And I continue to build that personal brand, even though I've landed a job, even though I get to speak, even though I get to do all of these things. For me, it's a part of me now. So building a personal brand, I don't think that there's any specific time you can get. If in fact, I think that if I had done a very good job of building my personal brand while I was in grad school, that I would not have struggled, because it took me a while. When I lost my job in 2018, it took me almost 2.5 years to finally get a role. It took me that long, right? And during that time, that was the time when I was actively building my personal brand to get into my first non-academic role. If I had done that 2 years ago, when I was in a postdoc or in a PhD program, I would have built enough of that. Is it social equity or just whatever it is, right? I would have built enough of that to to land a job fairly easily than it happened for me with those 2.5 years where I was struggling to like get anybody to even pay attention to me. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you so much for answering both my questions. I really appreciate it. And then we actually have a couple more questions from the audience. Another question from Shayla Shorter is about, what are your thoughts about monetizing your brand through partnerships, speaking engagements, etc.?
Totally. Do it. If there's an opportunity for you to, for a company is reaching, because we're in the education/science space. There are education/science companies. They want to get their names out there, and you start building a brand that reaches 10,000 people every single day. This company may want to say, hey, we would love for you to talk about our STEM educational product on your channel or on your LinkedIn or whatever, and we'll pay you this much, right? What you should always do though is realize that you deserve to be paid. And if you have ever encountered me on YouTube or LinkedIn, I'm always saying that you should get what you deserve to be paid. And so if you ever have the opportunity to do sponsorships, do your research so that you're getting compensated correctly, unless that's a brand that you wanted to work with forever and you're just so excited to be affiliated with them. But ask for compensation. Speaking engagements, I do speaking engagements, and I've done about 15 speaking engagements this year, and I do get compensated for speaking. So absolutely, I've done that for the last like year or year and a half. So absolutely, if you can do that, you can absolutely do that. And actually, I think that in the case of some PhD students, this may be helpful in actually generating some side income, because I know that sometimes we're kind of broke in school, and this may be pad your income a little bit. So great question, Shayla.
Yes, thank you for answering Shayla's question. And then there's a question from Black and Immuno actually saying, what do you make of separating social, personal, in parentheses, versus academic social media? So
I also get this question a lot. Yeah, I get this question a lot too. So this is the answer I've always given to people. I say that you can share as much as you want, and you can share as little as you want. Now, if you encounter me on my LinkedIn or my YouTube, I share very little about my family life. Most people know that I'm a mother, and even some people don't know that. Some people find out, like, have been following me for 2 years, and they're like, "What, you have a child?" I'm like, "Yeah, how come you didn't know that?" I sometimes talk about that. But that's how little I share about that part of my life. I'm mostly talking about my role in medical communications. I'm talking about the news. I'm talking about what may be happening in the field. So sharing my personal life, unless you go to my personal Instagram, you may not see a lot of that. And even on my personal Instagram, there is only I only share maybe 5% of my life. And that's because as a person, for me personally, I think that that's for me to enjoy. It's not everything I want to put out there. So, but then I'm very, very verbose on my LinkedIn, very, very verbose on my YouTube about get compensated well, about how do you leave academia, about what I'm doing now, and all of that. Or even, some people that want to stay in academia, there are times that I've done some content on that. So really, it's up to you to decide, right? You get to decide how much and how little you want to share. I've seen some people be completely vulnerable and share every aspect of their lives. That's for them to do, that's their prerogative. If you want to do that, you can do that. But I always say that if anything is disrespectful to anyone, if anything is derogatory or divisive to any group of people, to really be careful before you, and then count the costs of putting that out there. Because you may be really talking about something that needs to be talked about. But unfortunately, I've also seen people lose their jobs, people lose access to even ever getting another job in that field because they mentioned something that society deemed them not to be able to mention, right? So I always say, just see count the cost before you post anything. Count the cost of what that could result in. And I think that will save a lot of people a lot of headache. So that's my answer to that. It's your prerogative on what to share and what not to share. I focus very, very heavily on the professional. I also try to put a bit of sense of humor in my content, so you get to see me in my content. But there's also, my married life, there's also my child, there's also so many things that I do that's for me to enjoy. So that's up to you to decide where you draw the line.
Great, thank you so much for your answer to that question. And we have another question from Ayantika Sen. My apologies if I'm mispronouncing that. It says, as an Immuno postdoc, how can I identify a niche area where I can build my brand and at the same time be able to reach an audience beyond the Immuno community?
Okay, that's a good question. I think your niche area, what's the topic you're working on right now, right? That could be the niche area you start talking about. And also, you could also begin to talk about the immunology in a way. So the second part of the question, right, is beyond the immuno community. Begin to talk about your research in a way that people can identify with. So, for instance, my PhD dissertation was on the role of toll-like receptor 2 in modulating intestinal homeostasis. And when I say that to a normal person who is not in immunology, toll-like receptor 2 gut homeostasis, what is that, right? However, if I start by saying, how you eat probiotics, right? You eat yogurt with probiotics in that, and it's supposed to help your gut. Most people know that, and they're like, "Oh yeah." I'm like, "Okay." So that's what my research was around. Now let me tell you how that works. Right. So you're going to take your science and you're going to put it in everyday language and the things that we see every day and say, the reason why you take probiotics, or the reason why they market probiotics the way they do, is because we think that this bacteria produces this protein that interacts with a receptor that's on the epithelial lining of your gut. And that helps, that signaling pathway helps to keep the junctions between the epithelial cells. Right? So think about every day what is out there in the world that people see every day, that they use every day. They don't understand the science around that, and say, this is the topic I work on, and this is why this matters. So your niche and also don't be limited by a niche. It's good to start with a niche, but recently I haven't really focused on, even though I talk a lot to PhDs and postdocs about non-academic jobs and building a personal brand and all that. Right. There also is, like, sometimes I'll share something from my company. That's not really niche to that, but I'll share something around my company, or I'll share something from a book I'm reading, or something, that's a little bit outside of that. So don't also feel like you have to just talk about one thing and then that's it. Of course, in academia, this is what we're taught, like, focus on one thing and become an expert in that. But you can open it up a little bit more when you start building your personal brand too. So you can start with the topic you're working on now and then begin to open that up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for answering that question. Are there any additional questions anybody would like to ask? I'm actually in piggybacking on your thought about the idea of specializing in the hyperspecialization in academia. There's a book called Range by David Epstein that apparently discusses this, not in an academic context specifically, but in society in general.
Great recommendation.
Okay, well, I guess I will close off the session. And thank you so much, Dr. Nonterah, for coming and presenting your wonderful ideas to Black and Immuno and the Black immunologist community and beyond. And we really appreciate you for taking the time today to talk with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated it.